You're listening to The Parenting Space, a podcast brought to you by parents and practitioners from the South London and Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. A podcast where you can hear us discuss and debate issues around parenting and mental well-being. Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Parenting Space. Today we're joined by Sarah and we'll be talking about managing challenging behaviour. What a topic, Sarah. Hello.
Hello.
What made you pick this topic?
Oh, because it's such a hard one and it's just really difficult to do. It can make you feel really down and you can also see your child struggling behind it sometimes as well.
And have you noticed your approach to parenting change over the years and how you manage behaviour at home?
Oh, yes, definitely. I was brought up in quite a shouty household. I have been myself a very shouty parent, and I have a mood disorder that makes me sometimes extremely emotional. I think there's so many ideas out there about managing behaviour that are quite authoritarian and quite stern. And then there's the other side where a lot other people are, we must be really try and understand where the child's coming from. So there's a big spectrum of ideas about it.
And you speak to some parents who have been brought up themselves in a certain way and then notice the patterns being recreated in their own home with their children. And then it's interesting with other parents, you also hear this experience of almost going totally the opposite direction. So it's sometimes hard to know, I imagine. It's hard to know how to strike the balance. It's hard to know what the right approach is. And I imagine also every child's different and probably reacts differently to discipline and the management of behaviour. What's been helpful for you with your children?
For me, it's finding ways of expressing myself in a calm way, finding ways of saying things clearly, and also knowing when I really believe that their behaviour is actually challenging and needs to be dealt with, rather than it just being something that's irritating me in the moment. And perhaps I could, in fact, just ignore it and it'll go away.
So is there a certain amount of picking your battles with this?
Oh, yeah. I think I think it's an old one, but it's a really true one.
To be really clear on your priorities.
Yeah, because it's not an easy thing to do. You've got to be in the right place to be able to do it. You've got to feel in yourself that you've got the energy to do it. I don't know about anybody else, but I can swing between feeling quite calm and confident and I absolutely know what's going on and I know the right thing to say and things get sorted, to it really spiralling within me and making me completely overreacting and end up in a shouting match, to actually feeling like, oh, I can't be bothered, I can't do this, I can't deal with this. So having sort of a real understanding of when it's really important for me to be able to actually tackle some difficult behaviour, and then having some ways of doing that is really important, and doing it in a way which keeps my dignity, keeps my children's dignity, that isn't humiliating. There's lots of different ways of disciplining, if we want to use that word, children, which if you do it from a good place, work, but if you do it from a bad place, turn out to be a punishment, which makes them just feel awful.
There's some really important points there that you shared. I think firstly, the importance of knowing what is really a priority to you and having that awareness that sticking to that and raising that with your children, it takes a lot of work and effort. So you kind of want to pick what's most important to you and know what you're happy to kind of let slide, like you say. But also there's something really important there about how do we maintain the dignity and self-esteem of everyone involved when we're having to put down boundaries and reinforce them? It's a good question, Sarah. How do we do that?
It's not easy, and I don't think I do it effectively all of the time. But I think a lot of it starts with communication. It starts with being really clear with what happens when your child crosses over a boundary. So if they hit, is that something you're going to allow them to do? No. So you need to be able to talk to them before that happens. You know, if you've got more than one child, they're bound to have some kind of physical fight at some point. I don't know any, or maybe there are some that don't, but mine certainly do. And it's talking to them when you're all in a reasonable space where you can all actually be able to talk about it and say, well, what would happen if you start hitting your sister? What should we do? What should happen? Is there something fair? You know, you really love your screen time. Perhaps if you do something like that, then that screen time is going to be reduced or cut. Just setting out, look, this is something that none of us like to happen. We know that it can hurt other people. We know it might hurt you. You know, being really clear about that and then working out what's the fair way of dealing with it, and then doing it, being able to stick to it.
Being consistent. And knowing that they might, in that moment, start playing up, but being able to be strong enough to say, okay, I understand you don't like me holding this line. I understand you don't like being told that we're going to have this consequence, but you can choose to change your behaviour. You can choose not to hit. You can choose to be kind. You can choose to calm down. You can choose to change the way you're talking to me, making sure that they know there is a choice and that they can change that behaviour. That's such a key point there. So how we can maintain that sense of self-esteem, and that's such a good point. So there's something there about making sure you state your expectations, your boundaries ahead of time to give your child the opportunity to make a choice about their behaviour, which sounds very different to sort of just reacting to something you don't want to be seeing and taking something away in the moment, which probably feels, I imagine, very disempowering for the child. So when you can sort of being really clear in advance of what the rules are and what your expectations are. And also it sounds like you're also giving your child a path to how they can get some lovely treats and privileges. You know, if you are able to kind of follow these boundaries and these rules that we set, then you can play on the Game Boy or have some extra kind of TV time. And there's something quite nice. So you can also frame that quite positively, can't you? And as an additive thing rather than something that gets taken away. If there was sort of one bit of advice that you were to give to parents who are struggling with this, what would you say?
It might sound counterintuitive, but it would be to actually try and find a way of spending time with your child, to reconnect with them, do something with them that they really enjoy, so that you're not constantly worrying about them and their bad behaviour. You're kind of finding your way through to who they might actually be.
So understanding that there's going to be times where consequences need to be used, but making sure that's really well balanced with lots of those more positive moments and moments of connection between you and your child that can then shoulder those more challenging moments.
Absolutely, yeah.
Such a lovely, important point to end on. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to The Parenting Space, a podcast brought to you by the CAMHS team at South London and Maudsley NHS Foundation Trust. If you need support after today's discussion in the podcast, please talk to someone that you trust or follow the links in the description to get general advice and support. The Parenting Space is available on all podcast platforms. If you'd like to hear more discussions like this, subscribe to our channel and you'll receive a notification every time we release a new episode. If you've enjoyed listening to this episode, let us know your thoughts over on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. You can find us at theparentingspace_official.